people um, are coming in. We are so happy and delighted for you all to join us today. Hey, Jay, how are you doing? Long time. Hadn't seen you in a minute. Um, I thought I saw Terrence in here. Terrence, how you doing? Raleigh, North Carolina, Detroit, Michigan. I love that last paper you wrote, Terrence. It was a great paper, man. Appreciate you. And we're Black History Black History Education Studies, as we are kind of pushing that. Shakili asked what paper, Terrence, if you could tell Shakili your new paper there. Drop the link, she said in the comment.
Will do. Appreciate it, Dr. King, and
Right.
everybody on the Buffalo staff. It's good to see y'all virtually.
Definitely, definitely. Sorry I missed some of y'all at ARA. Know y'all had a ball at the Black and Brown party. Some of y'all probably still just trying to wake up from there. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started so we don't take too much of our time here today. All right. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. For those who do not know, my name is LeGarrette King. I'm a professor of learning and instruction here at the University of Buffalo. I'm also the founding director for the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education. And I want to welcome you to our Researching Race Professional Development Series for those scholars who are interested in race-related research, Black history, Black studies, et cetera, et cetera. I've noticed when I was a grad student way back in the day that, a lot of us are the only ones in our departments, programs, even some of us have advisors who don't even are not well versed within the concepts of race and race related topics. So I wanted to create a professional development learning center series for those of us who are in the field and would like to know how to research race better. But for those who are new um, to the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education, our professional development series. We are a professional development and research center located at the University of Buffalo. And our main goal is to be a space for PK-12 teachers as well as scholars to learn the most effective ways to teach Black history and race. And we do this through our 5 domains: our research projects, our professional development series, our networking, our advocacy, and our consultancy, right? So we have a very good group of people who are staffed at the center. So I tell people all the time, for things that went very well for the center, right? You definitely can give credit to our wonderful staff here, leading with Christina King, who is our assistant director, and of course, Donovan and Daphne and Abigail and Deanna and Montana and Russell, and of course, Hannah, who serves as our program manager. We welcome you to our Researching Race series. And I just wanted to kind of tell you all about a few events and programs that we have throughout the year and a few events that are coming up. Most of our most popular events center around our Black History Nerd series, our Educator Book Clubs, our Researching Race series, as you are in now, our Teaching Black History Micro-Credential, which we're finishing up our first cohort, and we're looking for our second cohort, which will start in September of 2025. And then our granddaddy of them all, the Teaching Black History Conference. Our next Black History Nerd session, which we have every second Saturday of each month. This is just a space where we come together to learn about Black history, life, and culture. We have these second Saturdays of each month. Every weekend, we're doing a Black History Month, and our next session and our last session for the academic year is May 10th. 2025, where we'll listen to our very own Donovan James, who will be presenting her research research on I've got a testimony reading, recovering, and revisioning in Black history picture books, and that will be beginning at 11 a.m. EST. Remember, we're just a bunch of nerds who wake up on Saturday mornings to learn about Black history, life, and culture. So please join us, for those sessions, and you can, register. One of the staff members will put the registration link within the chat there. We also have our educator book club. So for those who are interested in a more intimate learning environment, our educational book clubs are that particular aspect. Is a virtual, book club that lasts around 4 to 5 weeks, depending on the book and depending on the facilitator. And we have some really great instructors. Our book for our last book club of the semester, which I believe we've already had 2 sessions, but it doesn't matter. You can join us. Is Original Sins, the Miseducation of Black and Native Children and the Construction of American Racism by Eve Ewing. So you can register and get the Zoom link, for that book club. I believe we start back on this coming Saturday. And those happen around 10 a.m. For teachers and scholars who would like to improve on their Black history knowledge, their Black history content pedagogical knowledge as well, we're ending our first cohort of our Teaching Black History micro-credential. We have 14 wonderful teachers and educators from around the United States who have participated in our micro-credential. Right now, we are recruiting for our second cohort, which will start in September. I believe the last date for you to register or apply will be sometime in August, but why wait, right? So if you're interested in becoming part of our second cohort for our Teaching Black History micro-credential, where you learn to be an outstanding Black history teacher, both in the K-12 and the collegiate level, please just please apply. And of course, we'll have all those links in the chat. And our biggest program that we have is our Teaching Black History Conference, which happens every July this year, July 25th through the 27th. Our theme this year is Black Boy Joy, Black Girl Magic, the History of Black Childhoods. This will be located at the University of Buffalo downtown. So we're going to be downtown this year. We have over 90 presentations. So if you are one of the presenters, thank you so much for coming. But we are taking registrations for people to attend the conference. This is going to be a wonderful conference with 2 dynamic keynote speakers, and of course with our 90 presenters this year. So the registration link is going to be down at the bottom. It's one of the cheaper conferences that you can go to, but it packs a lot of punch and people just enjoy it. So we have people who've been coming for all 8 years. It's the 8th year that we have our conference. And we love to see these people, come back. This is a beautiful community of Black history educators from around the world. And so we look forward to seeing you. So the registration is $125. That's it, $125. And we have some wonderful room rates for our hotels that are probably less than $150, I want to say, per night. So if you want to meet some cool Black history educators, if you want to share resources, lesson plans, et cetera, just talk to some cool people, right? Come to Buffalo this summer, July 25th, 27th. We do have some retreats that go on earlier. So if you're interested in, attending a writing retreat, that begins on the 23rd and 24th. And if you are a social studies coordinator or a social studies leader or a curriculum leader, then we have a social studies coordinators retreat, which happens a few days before the conference as well. All right. So I want to introduce, Dr. Teague, who is a postdoctoral research fellow in the Ruth J. Simmons Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice Center, also co-affiliated with the Watson Institute. She is a critical Black literacy scholar, where her research contextualizes literature by and about Black people against moments in history that impacts Black lives. She approaches her research as a former K-12 educator and a high school librarian who focused areas of interest includes Black storytelling, archival recovery, and foregrounding resistance to understand pursuits of Black liberation. She is currently working on a book manuscript on Black women storytellers, telling, and resistant practices. She received her PhD from the best university in the world to receive your PhD, which is the University of Austin. All right, hook 'em in African diaspora studies. Dr. Nagbe is a postdoctoral researcher for is it the Pullias Center for Higher Education at the Rossier School of Education, and that's at the University of Southern California. She is an emancipatory data scientist where her work sits at the crossroads between Black thought, organizational studies, and network analysis. Overall, she studies how educational organizations are socialized to recruit, retain, and promote Black talent within the knowledge economy. She earned her BA in sociology and dual MA in social work and higher education from the University of Michigan and Harvard, as well as her PhD again from one of the best universities to receive your PhD, which is the University of Texas at Austin, in educational leadership and policy with an emphasis on higher education. So we're very excited to you have these scholars here who will educate us, inform us. I believe it's a little interactive, so just don't close your cameras and just sit back, but interact with our scholars today. But save all your questions towards the end when they finish with their presentations. Now, without further ado, y'all didn't come here to listen to me, right? Y'all came here to listen to these dynamic scholars, and I'll sit back and I'll have them handle their business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, LaGarrett. I appreciate that introduction. Hey, y'all. We are so grateful for the University of Buffalo and the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education for the work that you do to make research possibilities loud and visible for all. We uplift and are forever grateful to our ancestors who have paved the way to make it possible for us to be here. And much gratitude to each of you for being here and sharing space with us today. My name is Latoya Teague, and I am joined by my co-conspirator, Dr. Mariama Nagbe, and we present to you Black Ancestral Text Analysis.
All right, so technology is going to flow with us just like this presentation. So we're going to enter into this conversation together, just introducing ancestral elements that ushered us into this work, that grounds this work for us. And as we share that, we hope that you're thinking about meditating on your ancestors that have come before you and paved the way for us to be joined here today. We're going to then skedaddle into an overview of the framework that was gifted to us, and we were chosen to give to the world through our paper and the bookmark protocol that accompanies it. We're going to walk through some of the research questions that guides this particular way of thinking and approaching textual analysis, and then some examples of how to apply the protocol through different types of text in modern day and historical kind of fashions, transcending songs to photographs to books. Then we're going to invite you all throughout the whole presentation or conversation, use the chat to share your musings, your meditations, so that we can return to them towards the end where we want to hear your reflections and think together. And then we're going to close just with a thought to leave here with regarding an ethics of care.
All right, so by way of an introduction, I uplift the women who have paved the way for me personally. I stand on their shoulders, and they were also co-conspirators in my research journey. As I usher them into the room, I want you to think about ancestors you bring into the room with you. Take a moment to put their names on your hearts If you want to utilize the chat, as Mari mentioned, feel free to throw their names in the chat, say their names out loud, and do what leads you at this moment. And throughout the presentation, think about the gifts that they keep on giving. I bring to you children's writer Patricia McKissack, formerly enslaved Harriet Jacobs, my 11th grade English teacher, Eva Matthews, historian Stephanie Camp, my grandmother and her sister, Beatrice Teague and Agnes, Bell Hooks, Zora Neale Hurston, Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, and Nikki Giovanni. Collectively, these women have planted a seed on this blossoming research journey. I say blossoming because research is an approach. It's a practice of returning to material and being formed each time you meditate on that question, that object, that text. And so we invite you to return to the research, but also to bring your ancestors along with you.
That's my girl. And as we move through this conversation, you all will get the real and raw of how we meet, from the mind to the heart to the hands, that gifted us this work. So as I think about my ancestral foundation, it transcends different genres, ways of thinking, places, spaces, that connect me as a daughter of Detroit, Michigan, and Monrovia, Liberia. Ushered in through my grandparents on my mother's side, Irma Rosina Ragland and Freddie Lee Ragland, and my grandfather on my father's side, Philip Namwe Tia. Shout out to the motherland and the other lands that birth whatever it is that I decide to do any day and age. But this particular work through Black Ancestral Text Analysis is a meditation of a symphony of conversations between a lineage intellectually that Latoya and I call the connection between our intellectual ancestors, our intellectual elders, and intellectual descendants who are elders in training, those that have been born and those have been yet to be born, coming into this world with questions, curiosities, and other types of musings on what is this world that we've inherited and those that we want to leave behind for those that will inherit what we have to share. And I want to draw your attention. I won't name everyone's name on this particular slide, but this is a jam-packed screen of historians, both living, transitioned, and those that are emerging. And the namesake of our paper, Black Ancestral Text Analysis, is a gift given to us both by one of my favorite artist, intellectual artist, artistic activist, Alvin Ailey, who choreographed the piece Revelations through the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, as well as Sadia Hartman, who gifted us with the concepts of slavery having an afterlife that continues to haunt us today. And as we see how history continues to repeat itself, we don't shy away from it. We lean into it and get it together. We are thankful for Catherine McKittrick, who speaks back truth to power in her text, Dear Science. And last but certainly not least, we uplift the work of Sylvia Winter, who gifted us with so many things. But the one piece in particular that Black Ancestral Text Analysis received its wings from was in response to a special issue call asking us to meditate on what are the implications of her letter, her Dear Colleague letter in 1994, following the brutalized beating of Rodney King in California, where I used to live a couple years ago and had the honor bearing witness to that space, which is why Sylvia Winter's picture is located next to Lakeview Terrace, to talk about the ways in which place and storytelling are intertwined. So this is the ancestral foundation upon which we enter into this work, and we ask you to think about the ancestral foundation upon which you are ushering your curiosities and questions about the text that we encounter.
So this journey began well before the paper call that sealed the deal for us. Mari and I were in graduate school, and during the wee hours in the morning, we were up grinding. It was about 4:30 in the morning Central Time, and we were writing, meditating, and communing with the ancestors. I was working on reading the WPA narratives, and Mari was reading across multiple texts. And we were thinking together about the afterlives of slavery and its impact on learning, on education, on higher education, and text selection. We would work individually, and then at the end, we would debrief and share our findings from the coding of our sources. So this is where the research process manifested for us. We started noticing patterns across time. And then we would close those calls, thanking the ancestors for their gifts, and those gifts that keep on giving, even how we were brought into this space, right? I was telling Dr. King when we first joined, I was reading his work in grad school, and then him reaching out. I mean, it's just like a connection. And so, and I believe that the alignment works in that way. So.
Absolutely. So some of the pillars that anchor both the methodological points of entry or ways of researching things and answering questions that you may have are grounded in the methodologies of critical content analysis, but its original point of entry is in what Sylvia Winter gifted us with the concept of an inner eye, which points to a site to sit with internal gazes, perhaps colonial in nature, imperialistic in nature in terms of social structures. But when we think about our internal nudges that we may get when something just ain't right, when we come across of it, or we have some other types of curiosities that beg for us to do a little bit more digging. This is how we arrived to recovering revelations, and that recover has dual meanings to both cover in terms of protect, but also recover in terms of our rendition of discovery. Our ancestors and our elders ain't nothing new under the sun. So we find ourselves leaning into that particular truth, and we'll use different ways of knowing, with different ways of being, different ways of Black waymaking that we have found over the test of time, and regardless of time, finding themselves to us to usher in messages that are whispered about the ways in which our society is structured or our social conditions are shaped. So the other side of our anchors for Black ancestral text analysis draws from our intellectual ancestors and elders of Sylvia Winter, as you've heard me talk about before, Catherine McKittrick, who we named, and also Toni Morrison, who has a really powerful set of intellectual work, literary work, all the things that you can just fan over. But one in particular, she has this piece on ancestors as our foundation. And she talks about ancestral knowledges as a discredited science, a discredited way of knowing, a discredited knowledge that we lean into and not away from, even though some of the powers that be think we should do otherwise. So in terms of making this work accessible to a wider array of audiences and learners, whether you in the big house, the little house, the ivory tower, or down the block, we want this bookmark format of our protocol, which organizes a guiding set of questions to ask of text, to be guides for learners and readers of different text genres, so that you can think with these questions, think against these questions, and think through these questions as you try to discern some of the things that your inner nudges or your inner eye may be bearing witness to, but you may not be able to articulate. We'll get more into that later.
Hey, so in 2015, a high school student named Kobe Buran took a picture of his geography textbook, calling enslaved people of African descent workers that came to America for hard labor with no pay. What we appreciate about Kobe Buran is that he recognized the lie and refused to accept that story, a fictional story about how his and our ancestors were workers who willingly came to the Americas looking for jobs, but were forced to this country. The error implication suggests that African people willingly crossed the Atlantic for paid jobs, when the truth is that enslavers trafficked, tortured, raped, beat, forced them to work, and oppressed them. Kobe Buran's refusal offers a starting place to think of how the past shapes and continue to haunt Black lives. What's more bizarre about this case is that the textbook company, McGraw-Hill, is one of the major publishing companies that sell and distribute textbooks across the United States. And on top of that, Texas and California are textbook adoption states, meaning all other states usually follow the direction of Texas and California when ordering textbooks for their school. So despite this textbook passing review through many trained professionals, the peer review process before it was printed, it took a 16-year-old student in his classroom to discover what they called a textbook error. So we think with Kobe Buren and that he refused the lie and the uneasiness he perhaps felt, we believe was an ancestral whisper that something ain't right here. And so to all the K-12 educators in the room, we invite you to think beyond textbooks, inviting students to read across multiple selections of text, including primary sources, secondary sources, newspapers, literary texts, children's books, poems, songs, art, all in service to helping our children understand these topics. Next slide.
So the way in which to think about Black ancestral text analysis as a framework, not only methodologically, but before the call officially started, perhaps it's a theoretical intervention as well as one at the level of epistemologies, how do you know what you know, or even ontologies in terms of world making and world breaking. That our folks tend to have to do. So some questions to think about in this framework is how can we integrate each sub area of our bookmark version of the protocol that guides our understanding of how we go from storage and story to storytellers and storytelling to really unearth those silences where we believe is a treasure trove of where the ancestral exists so that we can uncover the ancestral within text. And again, reinforcing kind of the recovering revelations theme that this paper is titled under. It's important that everything that you find, you don't talk about. It's not everybody's business, especially under this type of weaponization of Black intellectual thought that we're not going to cower under, but really cover in terms of a cultural protection of what has been ours from the beginning and always will be, but needs to be shared in terms of truth telling that everyone needs to understand and utilize. So one of the other intellectual elders that I mentioned, Saidiya Hartman, who gifted us with this concept of this way of thinking of slavery having an afterlife, that it didn't die, it just reconstitutes itself under a different name. She also gifted us with this way of thinking about entering into the archives, where she says to read the archive is to enter a mortuary. It permits one final viewing and allows for a last glimpse of persons about to disappear into the slave holds.
I love
This
that.
is from her text, Lose Your Mother.
Yes, I love that, Maria, about gifts, right? Because they keep giving. So archives are traditionally defined as repositories or libraries, right? So these are the places that house a collection of historical records or information about people, institutions, groups of people. And so they're just simply a record of historical past. And so if you go into libraries or even state record-keeping institutions, most have collections of documents that hold secrets of the past. And so I invite us to think of these historical collections as archives for sure, but also to think about contemporary archives that are being curated today. And so articles are our archives collected in a journal. On social media, there are digital archives being curated under hashtags. For example, if you search the hashtag Black Lives Matter, there are a collection of thoughts being archived in the digital realm. And so as Saidiya Hartman encourages, return to those archives of your research collection to view again. And it is in this viewing we walk through Black ancestral text analysis, and we're going to use the most recent Black Lives Matter mural removal in Washington, D.C. And next slide. So now we're going through each of the parts of the Black Ancestral Text Analysis framework. And so if we start with the storage, it's the larger collection. So this is the container that holds the text. For example, if an individual poem that is in an anthology of poems, the anthology, this book, would be the storage. An album would be the storage to an individual song, to an individual song. An article for a journal, a letter found in an archival site, right? So the collection is the site. So looking at the larger collection is a way to look at something from like a bird's eye view. So the questions that would be worth exploring of the storage of a larger collection is how is that information stored, collected, distributed? Whose voices are present in these collections, right? And so if we go into, for example, my research, I went into slave archives. Going into those archives, most of the voices that were present were from the enslavers' perspective. I didn't find much on the enslaved people's voices, right? So what is the process for getting access to this data? Going into archives, you have to, sometimes you got to register in advance. You have to request to be into these archives. So there's a distance between some of the documents. Some you find online. And then there's some archives with paywalls, right? Where you have to be associated with the university in order to access these archives. So you questioning sources from the storage perspectives gives you insight into how is that information getting into the hands of the people who need that information. And so, for example, and thinking about parts of the most recent headlines of the Black Lives Matter removal in Washington, D.C. This mural was first conceptualized in 2020 after the police murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and several other lost lives of Black people in the United States. This project was originally conceptualized as a permanent mural costing over $4 million. The bold yellow letters were over 40 feet. One source said 50 feet tall, with the length of this mural stretching 3.5 football fields. It took 8 hours for the local artists, about 8 artists, to make mathematical calculations to ensure the precision of those 16 letters. I saw an article that said the letters could be seen from space. That's how large they were. And so even the street signage, right? So to have to change, you're changing street signs, had to, that was changed from to the Black Lives Matter Plaza. So the mural was removed last month when the federal government threatened to withhold federal funds. You can find more information about the Black Lives Matter mural, but we looked through several articles to learn more about the inception of this mural. There are lots of articles online highlighting this momentous feat. So getting into Black ancestral text analysis, focusing on the storage. In our case, we looked at 2 digital presses where we interrogated the New York Times and the Associated Press coverage of the Black Lives Matter mural removal. So the questions that would be essential to my research would be, who is the audience? Who is their audience? Are there paywalls for assessing their digital content? New York Times is a membership paid exclusive content unless your university pays the subscription granting access to it. And so that costs us about $1 per week. And then that price gradually increases each year. While the Associated Press, the digital subscription access varies depending on the amount of articles, but you can find a lot of their content without a paywall. And so starting with this overview of the collection tells you information about the readership, which determines how the outlet tells their story, right? And so to the right, the media bias chart offers an overview of the various media charts and their bias perspectives for the digital content. And you can find this online by searching media bias chart if you're looking at articles as your newspaper articles as your piece. But as a research approach to using this digital text, knowing the outlet's biases gives you insight into how the outlet chooses to tell their story, right? So to get a full view, perhaps choosing an article from the span of more conservative outlets to more liberal outlets would contextualize the fullness of the story from a wide vantage when researching information about the storage of a piece, right? And so it's all about reading widely, not taking a source at face value, but seeing where that source came from. Speaking about archives, a lot of those librarians and archivists have to purchase those documents, right? I had when I was on a research trip, I asked the librarian, the archivist, how do they acquire these pieces? And one of the president of the archive said that we can only find what we gain access to, right? So thinking about enslaved people's lives, a lot of those documents were destroyed. And so the archives don't even have everything. They have what they can purchase and what remains. And so what does that say about the source? But I've given you a brief overview of the storage. So that's the background of the collection from digital sources synthesized from online research.
And building upon the storage, as Latoya started to speak to, these texts have a story. But what is the story about? Who's being centered as the main person, character, agent of focus? How does power play a role in these particular stories that are being captured or covered or uncovered in the text that you encounter? And we also want to think through what Kimberly Crenshaw and others from Black feminist thought traditions gifted us with the concepts of intersectionality and how these intertwined structures of oppression through and around and because of our overlapping identities may be present and or absent in the stories being told. How are those particular identities being marginalized or essentialized within the story or being excluded or erased? So we want you to think about using this particular point of entry into interrogating text with both storage and story in mind. And when you apply that to our ongoing case or examination of the Associated Press and the New York Times covering this erasure of the Black Lives Matter memorial, mural, plaza, not only do we want to draw your attentions to the headlines, we also want to draw your attentions to the ways in which they're framing who they are as authors, covering from a journalistic perspective these particular stories. So on one end, the Associated Press really zooms in on the architectural aspects and the power structures of institutions such as the White House, instead of focusing on what the New York Times kind of offers in terms of a point of understanding what's happening here. Black Lives Matter Plaza is gone, but its erasure feels symbolic. Symbolic of what? Have we been here before? Who is the we in this? The caption underneath the title here talks about the movement that prompted Black Lives Matter to be painted in bold yellow near the White House is in retreat. Just because the removal of that particular symbolic representation of the movement may be taken away, the spirit and the stories that are carried with its memory cannot be erased. So for someone who may encounter this site of storage where the mural once was, how do we make sure that we can remember or discern what might have been there that is now taken away because of different power structures? The next portion of our protocol is about storytellers and storytelling. I alluded to kind of getting into the background of the author who is telling the story. Authors can be both writers, they can be photographers, they can be curators of archival collections, they can be you. Just collecting or passing down pictures or heirlooms through your family. They can be sites such as my elementary/middle school Irma L. Henderson Institute, who is one of the women on my Ancestral Foundation, pictured, where when you go to Chicago and Metataw's intersection in Detroit, it's an abandoned building because it moved across the street. But when we think about what happens when we try to remember, and how does the storyteller and ways that they are telling the stories capture or complicate or complement what is to be known? These are some of the questions that we want you to think through and interrogate when you think about the stories that are being told, those who are telling them, and how they're telling them. What gets remembered, what gets disremembered, what gets lost, what gets found when we ask those sets of questions. And so for an example, here, these two images, one from the Associated Press on your left, the other from the New York Times on your right, kind of points to the storytelling from both pictures, but also a juxtaposition of power. So when you think about the institution of the federal government, this particular picture on your right with the crews staring straight into this ivory tower that is the White House, and the dirt that is placed on what were those bold, bright yellow letters that could be seen from space. This is reflective of that burial that Sadia Hartman was talking about when you enter into the last viewing of this archive. So from the perspective of institutions, it's like, okay, maybe it's just business as usual. We're just doing what we were told here. But what does that do to the people whose histories are being destroyed, essentially, or attempted to, such as in the Associated Press image on your left that talks about, and the caption shares, tears roll down the face of Starlette Thomas of Bowie, Maryland, as she holds a chunk of pavement from the Black Lives Matter mural, Monday, March 10th, 2025, as the mural begins to be demolished in Washington. She said, "I just needed to be here to bear witness," says Thomas, who was present at the 2020 George Floyd protests. "For me, the Black Lives Matter sign etched in stone what was a declaration of somebodyness. And to watch it be undone in this way was very, very hurtful. To walk away with a piece of that means it's not gone. It's more than just a brick and mortar," which is an interesting talk back to the title that we saw in the previous slide about brick and mortar now gone. So we want you to think about this as we move from storage to story to storytellers and storytelling. But we don't just end there. There's more to this that needs to be recovered.
Thank you. And so we would argue that as researchers, you should already consider the storage in your research process, the collection of the text, the stories, right? Those in power, and then those less visible. And the story, the collective holistic picture of the context of the text, situating moments of refusal to said power. And now the final selection of Black ancestral text analysis is where we invite you to think deeper. At this point in your analysis of the text, you should have a return to the text, reading it from multiple vantage points. That means returning to it multiple times, right? So as I direct you to now meditate on the silences, Audre Lorde invites us to think about the silences as a space where words aren't yet formed. Kevin Quashie, in his text, says to think about, in Sovereignty of Quiet, he says to think about the sovereignty or the reverence of quiet, the loud and the expressiveness found in the quiet. So I encourage you, as you are returning to the mortuary, as Sadia Hartman gifted us, for one last viewing what still remains to know. We believe the ancestral requires deep meditative knowing. This is why we wouldn't put a number of the amount of returns it takes to return to a source, right? Think about yourself as a reader. If you read a text or you're watching a movie, every time you return to that text or you return to that movie, your brain collects more and more information. And so we call this space of this like returning and the silences, the meditation, the space of the ancestral. Mari, can you take us to the next slide? And so in this ancestral space, this is where after the encountering this street mural, we invite you to think with us for a minute. Pause and perhaps meditate. What are the words you don't yet have concerning this mural removal? And as you're pausing and you're thinking about this removal of this site, feel free to drop in the chat any thoughts that come up for you. I hear that, Shakila. Me too. Mm. Thank you, Vidal, for that. Yep. Sadness, loss, frustration. I've seen rage several times. Heat in my chest. I hear that. So further food for thought. Grief, cowardice, frustration, suffocating. White nationalism. Where do we go now? How many times are we supposed to forgive? Having built it. We've seen moments in our history where erasures of our lives, our identities, our lived experiences were removed, just like this marker. Historically, I heard someone say last week at a conference that we were kidnapped people who were forced into this country. And somehow, despite the attempts of erasure, just like this mural, we rise. Identities, cultures, names, birthdays were erased, but we survived. Laws were written prohibiting formerly enslaved ancestors from reading and writing. We learned anyway. School closings, setting our institutional establishments on fire, redlining, all those things that were meant to disenfranchise us, but we rebuilt. And so yet, we are currently living through another form of erasure. So with the banning of books, dismantling DEI, discrediting knowledge-producing institutions. So the physical erasure of the Black Lives Matter mural in DC is an ancestral warning and wisdom that we've been here before. And just like before, we'll rise. Any additional thoughts you want to add to that, Mari?
For sure. When we think about sources, as we are revisiting the first and then the next text that scaffolds a more deeper understanding of the story, storyteller, storytelling, storage that we're trying to uncover here. It was important for us to lean into the memory keepers that come from Black institutions. So the picture on the right that you see here represents the Black Organizing Project based in Oakland, California. They are a Black community organization that is multi-generational, that makes sure that ways in which we are educating each other and ourselves does not get erased because of legislative powers, political weaponization, and other forms of power and criminalization of Black thought, memory, because that is our collective history, regardless of if you identify as a person of the Black African diaspora, Caribbean, wherever you are. We're all intimately intertwined. So we're all therefore responsible for not only recovering the revelations that these archives, both that are easy to access and those that are not easy, those that cause dis-ease when we do find out the true origins of how the story that was passed down over time comes into our hands. And we are sitting with a particular responsibility of truth telling about Black way making, about Black ways of knowing, about Black cultural practices, those that are to be known, those that are unknown, and those are yet to be discovered or uncovered. So this kind of really helps us understand why another aspect of our Black studies, Black ancestral text analysis, is grounded in a Black studies methodology unapologetically and on purpose. It also is situated and anchored by and embraced within, if you will, this concept of embodied knowledge. The body keeps score. The body remembers. Our emotions are sources of knowledge too. So therefore, we argue, just like our intellectual ancestors and elders have argued, especially those who, like the center here that is hosting this conversation, is merging Black studies with Black education research on purpose and in purpose, that we argue for an alternative approach to doing research as Black, to understand Blackness, because Black studies is a discerning practice. We don't take things at face value. We question it all, but we also understand the lineages and want to understand what the lineages are carrying us to and through, within time, against time, and across the stands of time. So that's Black ancestral text analysis from the format of the newspaper articles and images, and the articles themselves with the captions under the pictures. But we also wanted to offer some other ways of engaging with text. So here you will see one of our artistic intellectual activists, Billie Holiday, who is rendering a song that she did not necessarily write herself, but her performance of this particular piece bears witness to an atrocity of lynching that has happened and still happens in our ongoing histories. I'll play the beginning stanza, which you'll see the lyrics listed on your left. I want you to read both the words as she's singing them, as well as the expression in her embodied knowledge as she's conveying this particular battle cry against strange fruit.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, Black bodies swinging in the summer breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
I don't know how. I would have cried every time. But think about the power within which this era that she's singing this particular song as a battle cry, but also an archival way of remembering not only what happened to us, but what may happen when the weaponization of us standing up against mistruths, violence, and other forms of oppression disenfranchisement, and ways of storytelling the truth against power. This is one way to remember, like I said, an atrocity such as lynching, but the ways in which our artists, who are the vanguards of our activist movements at times, help us to remember. Oops.
I'm going to offer, so we want to make connections, right? So if there is an opportunity to make a connection off of a text, so you're teaching history perhaps about lynching, I want to offer this trigger warning. So if you have to come off screen, it's going to be a quick second, that we want to show this photo as to connect to the previous text, right? So song connecting to photo, hopefully starting from a moment of joy, but giving you that space if you need to step away really quickly. And we can go to the next slide. And for the sake of time, I won't spend too much time on this, but this image and others were circulated in the press. The original image actually shows the bodies of those lynched in the photo. But if we zoom in and look at the storytellers, what are their faces saying about their participation in this lynching? And as before, if you drop your thoughts in the chat, these images were taken and being circulated in newspapers. Postcards were made to advertise the atrocities. What are the words that you don't yet have? Feel free to place them in the chat. And for the sake of time, we'll go to the next one.
Because the story don't stop there.
Right. Finally, we'll take you to a children's book. So we went from song to a historical document, archival document, to now a children's book, right? Showing you that this protocol, this framework can be applied to any text, right? Asking questions of sources could be applied to anything. We hope that when you walk out into the world and you start seeing things, you see them deeper now, and you start to question why is this sign here? Why is this, who orchestrated this, right? What's the questions behind the scene? So finally, we take you to a children's book, A Moment of Joy. Black Ancestral Text Analysis can apply to all texts. Patricia McKissack, the late author of Never Forgotten, was the author of over 100 children's books. But we present this story in particular to think about a bit on how the author renders the ancestral in this story for children. So just a little bit about the story. Dinga picture on the title 2 was a child at the start of the book, was kidnapped from his home in West Africa. And the ancestors in this story, which you can see on both sides, were the elements of water, fire, earth, and wind. The ancestors, Dinga's dad had been searching for him, and the ancestors in the story goes and delivers the message on Dinga's, where is Dinga, right? And so they came back and found and told his father that Dinga was working as a blacksmith in South Carolina, right? To delivering the message on his son's whereabouts. And the father was also, so the father taught him this craftsmanship, and now he's working in South Carolina, right? So we know that this is a story that teaches capture, transatlantic slavery, antebellum slavery in an age-appropriate way, weaving in the role of the ancestor to carry messages across the African diaspora. So what if we invite the messages of the ancestors into our research excavation processes? What types of knowings may be revealed in our return and our continued return to the text and to the sources? We can go to the next slide. We are not going to go through and do this right now. But if you can take a moment in the chat, we'll use the chat instead of Padlet, to drop any final thoughts, any questions, anything that's lingering when it comes to using this methodological approach to uncovering the ancestral in text. We'll give you about 1 to 2 minutes to drop those in the chat. Anything that you might still be wrestling with using a Black ancestral text analysis framework in your returning and re-returning, right? Because we go to a source and we keep going back to that source and we keep going back to uncover more and more information. So drop those questions in the chat. Or any thoughts that you want to continue to wrestle with, right? And then on the next slide, tune in for us as one of our ancestors, Nikki Giovanni. She's reading a poem, one of my favorite. This one, I always come back to it, where she reflects on, in memoir style, on her childhood. And again, drop anything in the chat that comes to mind as we listen in on this 1-minute clip.
Further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Nikki Giovanni.
Uh-oh, can't hear Mari. Can y'all hear?
Remembrances are always a drag if you're Black. You always remember things like living in Woodlawn with no indoor toilet. And if you become famous or something, they never talk about how happy you were to have your mother all to yourself and how good the water felt when you got your bath from one of those big tubs that folk in Chicago barbecue in. And somehow, when you talk about home, it never gets across how much you understood their feelings as the whole family attended meetings about Hollydale. And even though you remember, your biographers never understand your father's pain as he sells his stock and another dream goes. And though you're poor, it isn't poverty that concerns you. And though they fought a lot, it isn't your father's drinking that makes any difference, but only that everybody is together. And you and your sister have happy birthdays and very good Christmases. And I really hope no white person ever has cause to write about me, because they never understand Black love is Black wealth. And they'll probably talk about my hard childhood and never understand that all the while I was quite happy.
Oh, that's right.
Hey. What always gets me is Nikki's finish of that quite happy. That is always a world where outsiders, researchers, and what she names as white people writing about us. But all the while, she was quite happy. So I believed in her naming of white people. Nikki Giovanni is also pushing us to think beyond, think about outsiders as we're coming to someone else's stories in these historical documents, into our research projects, and getting to know the objects or the text, whatever you're researching at a surface level, and then writing from a surface level vantage. Regarding research, you may investigate the storytellers, but fail to research the lives of those less visible. Perhaps you learn about the archival collection, but fail to critique it from a place of power. Or maybe you pick up a text, you read it once, and you think you've done all you have all you need to know to write about this subject, this object, this text. So this poem is an ancestral message from a recently transitioned as ancestor to research from a place of knowing, to return to the text and intimately know it, to keep returning until the ancestors reveal all there is to know about the text. Because it is in that returning and that re-returning and that re-returning where you will come closer in your research process of uncovering and understanding those underlying messages, those quite happies, as Giovanni gifted us. And it is from this place of returning and returning that you learn to research from a place of care. And I'm going to pass it off from you to you, Mari.
Yes, so as we bring this part of our conversation to a meditative close and open it up for dialogue. One kind of mnemonic device is acronyms that we love. So one that we want to offer here as a guide on how to marry both and mirror an ethics of care for Black ancestral text analysis as you carry it out, but also utilizing an ethics of care for the types of text that you include and exclude. We're intentional about not necessarily talking about some of our traditional ways of doing qualitative methods or even quantitative approaches to qualitative sources, such as coding or reaching data saturation. These are particular types of modalities for analyzing that we don't necessarily condemn, but we definitely disempower as our primary ways of thinking through patterns that we recognize. What would be the language that our ancestors use to remember kind of the recognition of patterns or some inconsistencies across the text or stories or storage or storyteller? So with this ethics of care, it's important first and foremost that Black waymaking, Black storytelling, Black spirituality, and fill in all the blanks of Blackness. They are ancestral knowledge forms. And in order to treat these particular ways of knowing with the respect that is due, you must first understand that citational practices are political acts. So we employ you to render Black intellectual labor visible because we are sensitive about our stuff. And when you go using the language in which we toil to bring into this side of earth and you don't cite us, it's a problem. That erasure is being replicated in ways that produce more harm than necessary. The next aspect of this care ethic is to anchor your interpretations of Blackness in love, respect, and historical truths, not historical mistruths and ways of misremembering. Project fill in the blank. The next ethic of care here is a refusal of settler colonial logics of surveillance. In other words, feeling that need to always watch your back because you always being watched. What the ways you say, the questions that you ask, who you turn to, and revealing kind of the insights and ancestral knowledges that you may come across. This process of codification, that Black bodies have been counted as property once upon a time, and still to this day, and instances of erasure. These are the aspects of settler colonial logics that we refuse on purpose. And finally, we implore you to engage ancestral wisdom recovered by Black thinkers, both past, present, and in the future.
And I wanted to back up to the other part about citing, y'all. We cite Black people, cite Black women, cite, that's a citational practice, and that we must engage in. And so, in closing, return to your ancestors that you placed on your heart at the beginning of our presentation, and thank them for the gifts that they keep on giving. Sending good energies to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and so Dr. King LeGarrette, we can start with questions through the chat. You help us usher in the questions, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. So, first of all, let's give our visitors a hand for that wonderful presentation that they had. What we'll do is, if Daphne, Donovan, and Abigail kind of and D kind of search through the comments, see if there's any questions there. But you can unmute, raise your hand, and start asking questions here. We have probably about 20 minutes or so.
So looking in this chat, LaShawn got a question. What are some questions we should use to help guide our analysis when analyzing text written by white people about us? Could the link to this protocol be shared with us? And someone responded, but I just wanted to open the floor to see if you all would have a response to that question.
Yes, so when everything is shared out, we'll also share the link with you, Dr. King, and if you can share it out for the protocol question. On that bookmark, the questions that you ask a source, any source, you can apply those questions to any source. Donovan, you reached out to me talking about you were working through children's books with it, right? And so to approach any source, even those that are harmful. And so if I were to spend more time on the source of the lynching photo, right? We would take these same questions, right? Who are the storytellers? What's the story? Where did this photo come from? How many, how was this information disseminated, right? So any source, any text, this protocol can be applied to. Thank you for that question.
And I also want to add, my dog wanted to talk too. What up? I want to uplift two of my sister scholars, Drs. Dawana Bradley and Dr. LaShawn Washington, who are gifting us with this way of thinking about our positionality statements beyond just the bland ways in which we were taught, if you're even taught, how to include them in your research practices and approaches, and how does using different genres of art, such as images, such as poetry, such as spoken word, that you use audio sources or text to be able to convey. These are different ways that we talk Black to some of these research methods that we've been told are the traditions of the practice. And that not only goes for those who do research from a traditional professionalized perspective, but research on trying to figure out your family's history, what mortuaries are in your home, in your neighborhoods, and how do you stand to bear witness to those things, those stories, those people. We understand that when we juxtapose both that lynching photo with that lynching song, the strange fruit are people. Calling out those instances of injustice was what Ida B. Wells did. And they ran her up out of where she was and had to flee to Chicago. So those types of stories are layered. And although it may be difficult to encounter these very destructive and distorting types of text, it's that dialectic between sources and this returning to the text multiple times in order to discern those ancestral knowledges, which we argue are both wisdoms and warnings intertwined. And you sit with the responsibility of what you do with that once you're allowed to bear witness and kind of meditate on those thoughts and share them with the world in different mediums. We chose bookmarks. We chose this platform. We're choosing other ways that are unknown right now on how we share that. So thank you for that question. It's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I didn't see any more in the chat, but if anyone wants to, oh, there we go.
Yes, Keely.
Good evening. This was an amazing presentation, and my question just deals with making it accessible in specific content areas. So my particular content area is economics. And I see how this could be used to talk about economic history, particularly among us, and expand that conversation of our contributions to this land in a way that's excluded from the curriculum. However, in this current context, this current violent context, how do we, strategically navigate these things and include them into our curriculum and instruction planning without retaliation?
It makes me think of what Sadia Hartman also brings to our awareness in her text, Scenes of Subjection, when she talks about how the whip gets internalized. the whips that were used to brutalize us historically and contemporarily. We sometimes just succumb to the fight because we're tired, because we're afraid of retribution and things of that sort. But I think it's important to, one, cultivate spaces of refuge, to be able to think, not under the guise or gaze of that internal eye, which Sylvia Wynter initially critiqued as coming from colonial logics. But what happens when we flip that on its head in a space where we can actually think about what is it that needs to be said? What are some kind of practices that we, I don't want to say naturally, because we are socialized to learn them, but some of the norms of sitting still and thinking twice before you speak once. Those types of colloquialisms that we use, I would encourage you scaffold. What does it mean to talk back to or refuse to accept things at face value? That isn't a watering down of our ethics. It actually is an honoring of them. Now, I'm not necessarily in the academy as traditionally, I don't want to say traditionally. I'm not positioned in ways that some of our colleagues who are teaching, learning, or what have you may be doing. So I can't necessarily speak to how do you wage intellectual warfare back against these oppressive power grabs and regimes. But I'm sure someone else in this space can speak to some strategies on how to continue to struggle forward in the struggle for freedom and not backwards to the struggle of silence.
Yeah, Shakila, something that also I think I'm hearing as part of the underlying question is, especially with writing curriculum, what about time also for incorporating this approach, right? Getting students to walk through a source in the amount of time, sometimes the curriculum doesn't lend itself to time. And so I'm also curious as to what type of sources you are currently using with your students in the economic class, because I believe that through this, we could give this same protocol, this framework, this bookmark to a student at any level, right? And just tailor those questions, scaffold those questions for our students. And then they could, so we're essentially teaching them a strategy of interrogating all sources, right? And so that means any text that we give them, never to ever accept it as face value. And so I think that will, especially when we send it to LeGarrette, the bookmark, and that also can be disseminated throughout, that this, just applying this strategy to anything, putting an image on the board, right? And so what I like to think of as, I don't even know if I should say this because I don't know who in the room, but I want to say it. We must teach the truth, right? And so if there perhaps administrators are coming in to observe that day, you might want to change your image on observation day, right? But you know that there are stories or sources that must be taught. You put that image on the board and then give the questions to the students and listen for what they'll come up with, and then shaping, facilitating the learning process as students give you what they interpret from these sources that we present to our students. So that was a good question. Thank you for that. I saw a question about Ancestry.com. And the only thing I want to say about that is in like research excavation, you are applying multiple reads across multiple sources, right? And so you may apply Ancestry.com to census data, right? So you are using all of the sources as you're bringing to your projects. And so this wide read, even using Ancestry.com, you could apply these same questions to a platform like Ancestry.com. How many times are we supposed to forgive, Dawn?
Yes, y'all. Pray for me.
I saw the old church archivist. Mari started us off saying some stories also ain't for everybody, right? And so our ancestors knew that. And in their collection processes, sometimes those stories were rendered in songs. And so all right. So if I'm trying to hide something, I'm rendering it in song, right? So there are some things we don't even have access to. But I believe in that returning as you are approaching your research topic, there things are just going to uncover. And so it's in that ancestral is that you keep asking questions. New questions are formed. And then in this returning the returning to the text, returning to sites, right? If you're reading about a particular text and then going to that site, Mari named going to um, the site in the no human involved the police site. So the site in Cali.
And visiting is deep. Before I moved back to Detroit from Los Angeles, walking that street, I wept. I mourned. And most won't know this until now. So y'all get first dibs on the tea. Those are images that I took at the site. And I have audio. One of the first things that I said is, why do they keep hurting us? Why do they keep killing us? Walking this street, it looks like nothing ever happened. So to move onto that block and not know that particular history that's in that soil, this framework of Black ancestral text analysis is just a really powerful way to remember and recover, and make sure we're not being complicit in the ease of erasure. And that we're also being intentional about who we're placing our ancestral knowledges in the hands of, and those that we must keep ancestral knowledges away from. I have to give word to my parents who are on the call, my other family who are on the call, my niece that's on the call, who I hope she can tap into that Black nerd conversation, because she knows how to brilliantly draw anime, and hers is Black. And that's just a beautiful way of remembering and being able to use art and different other forms of text to remember and recover those ancestral messages that not only are being passed down to us, but we're not going to be here forever either. We're going to make transition. So what legacies are we leaving behind? What truth telling are we upholding in the ways in which we do what we do?
Marilyn, it looked like Marilyn had a question.
Okay.
First, I just want to tell you all thank you for this. I'm currently working on my dissertation and have been trying to find a framework. I wanted to do something with Sankofa, but the only thing I could find was, okay, I can call it new historicism and then integrate Sankofa. So this gives me a better framework for what I was trying to do with some of Octavia Butler's works and some of the narratives of formerly enslaved people. But as far as archives are concerned, I just have like this, I was thinking about, you know, how churches and how different Black institutions as well as HBCUs have, you know, kept so many things. And it seems that now larger institutions are partnering with them because they realize, oh, Black people keep everything. And it's great, but it also kind of scares me because I wonder what's going to happen now that people know we all collect things, whether you ever went to school or not. We keep programs, we keep documents, we keep records. And I called my undergraduate institution, which is a HBCU, and was trying to get to the archives, but it made me proud. But at the same time, I was like, man, we're really protective about our stuff, because I called the archivist, and a lot of times, well, if you all know, you know, HBCU archivists are funny people. And I know this woman. I grew up knowing this woman, and she didn't even know it was me. She was like, who are you and what are you trying to do? I was like, okay, let me back up. To you know, your comment that not everything is meant for everybody. It's like, what are you trying to do with this information? Can we trust you to even know the things that are here? So thank you all for bringing that up concerning protocol too.
Yeah, thank you for that. Ooh, archives and going into them and trying to look that wall we were talking about. Sometimes you got to get past the wall.
Okay, you have anything? You unmuted.
I was just going to ask because we know this money is about to go away. It's already going away. And thinking about he signed that executive order revoking the HBCU initiative. So the paltry funds to preserve our history,
Mm.
that's even going away too. So what does that look like as we try to engage in this work over the next few years with this very real threat of everything being taken away from us?
That's a really, whew, I am wondering that same question. What does it look like on the collection side? What does it look like on the retrieval side? Um, I don't know. What I will say is that we have always been strategic in our refusal to barriers being put up, stopping our genius, stopping our collection, stopping our retrieval, right? And so we would just have to be strategic. Even I saw that when the Department of Education funds were cut, and then the research, like the institution, like people, the places people are going to get their research are being removed, and people having to quickly go online and find the stuff, their data offline. It is a real threat. Um, Dr. King, if you can jump in, if you have anything in regarding how to capture in the midst of a moment where our institutions are being shut out for us or researcher purposes, or anyone on the call, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I just think as one of my mentors, said in a call a few months ago, Joyce King, he was like, we have to go back to the Black community as shepherds of the knowledge, right? Um, and I can push back a little bit. I think the Black community, I think, is a little bit different, you know. Here, but there's some remnants of it where Black folk have always just like Marion's story about the Black archivist at the HBCU, is that we're very protective, but then also we have a tradition of not telling as well, particularly not telling those stories that could, uplift us, warn us, have us kind of connected. So that's why I think this framework is really important. Both of the methodology method, as well as a theoretical framework, which, we'll probably get into a little bit later, of really excavating what's going on in our, Black-centered knowledge. So, but we are towards the end. If the great doctors can share their information, I know there's some websites, I know there's some research, maybe some books, coming out. If you can share that with the group, that would be great. If there's questions that you all want to, ask the good doctors here, any messages, some last messages you want to put in the comments, I'll make sure I share that with, the good doctors, and have them read over it or answer any questions that you may have. This is your last chance. As we close, we know the summer's coming up. The Teaching Black History Conference is coming up. Um, um, some of you all we haven't seen in a while, and we miss you. Come back to the conference, right? As many people know, we're an entrepreneurial center, right? That means we don't take any money from anybody except for the people who support us, right? So, if you support the things that we do, if you like more programs such as this, because we have to pay these folk, right? You know what I'm saying? Y'all like Donovan and Daphne and Abigail and all those people like that. And if I can recruit some more people like that, I gotta pay for these people, right? You know, if you like Hannah being organized, because you know I ain't organized, y'all ain't getting no emails from me. So, you know, if you want to have emails from LeGarrette, I gotta have somebody like Hannah, right? And I gotta pay, right? So, so, so if you appreciate the things that we do, we have to go back to the roots, right? So you know, please support us. If you can't come to Buffalo, think about supporting a teacher to come. Pay for their registration, $125. Or just come yourself. We would love to see you. So I just want to say I miss you all. All right. So if you haven't been to a conference in a minute, please come and hang out with us. All right. Any final words, Dr. Teague and Nagbe? Any final words that you all have?
This was great. Keep returning to your sources. Keep tapping into the ancestral, because those answers will come to you. And
All
thank
right.
you all for sharing space.
For those who are in the semester very soon, drink your water, get your sleep, right? Finish up strong. All right. If there's no further questions, I'll leave the Zoom on a little bit for those who would like to leave messages. If otherwise, I will see you May 10th for Black History Nerds with Donovan. You all have a wonderful evening and week.